Hey guys, and welcome back. If you are new here, hi, my name is Liz, and I'll be your host on this terrifying journey through lores, legends, and the most horrific thing of all, laundry. Because I have been avoiding mine like someone who suffers from plentophobia. Oh, you know, just the fear of washing machines. All jokes aside, this week we'll be taking a little trip back in time. So grab those baskets and get comfy. Through my travels between Arkansas and Georgia, a large portion of my time was also spent in Tennessee. I've experienced everything from Graceland, the home of the late Elvis Presley, to the home of Casey Jones along with the Railroad Museum, to Nashville, the home of country music. But there are other historical places, darker places, scattered throughout the dense forest of Tennessee. Every time I take a trip to Wisconsin, I have to pass this particular location, and without knowing exactly where I am, it's like you can feel it in the air. In the backwoods of rural Tennessee, a family pushed to the brink of ruin and a curse that has persisted for generations, keeping an icy grip on the land where it was born. Today, we travel back almost 200 years to the location of the most well-documented haunting in American history. This is the haunting of the Bell Witch. In 1804, John Bell Sr., a farmer from North Carolina, moved his family to the Red River Bottomland in Robertson County, Tennessee, near the present-day city of Adams. John bought land on the Red River and erected a house for his family, which included his wife Lucy and 4 boys, Jesse, John Jr., Drury, and Benjamin. He became one of the area's most successful planters, eventually amassing 398 acres of land and clearing a number of them for planting. John Bell Sr., a religious man, was named an elder for the Red River Baptist Church, which has been the focus of the community since it was founded in 1791. Bell and his wife had 3 additional children, Richard, Joel, and Elizabeth, whom they also called Betsy. Unfortunately, barely a decade after moving in, the Bell family would find themselves at the center of an epic haunting, which began when John Bell himself discovered an unknown animal sitting among the rows of corn growing on his farm. Okay, so we've talked about cornfields before on our Quick Wash series, but I think it needs to be said again just in case. If we have learned anything from horror movies, cornfields are no-go zones. If you want to stay safe, stay out of the cornfield. That includes corn mazes during spooky season, okay? Friends, don't let friends go into cornfields. Now that we have that covered. The creature was claimed to have a rabbit's head on a dog's body. Bell raised his gun and fired at the beast, astounded by its appearance. Bell missed the shot as the beast had already vanished. But the Bells' unusual animal encounter was only the beginning. That same evening, the Bells began to hear someone beating on the walls of their log cabin, with the commotion only ceasing when darkness gave way to the day. The sounds reappeared the next night after night, increasing louder and more powerful with each passing night. Every night, when the noises started up again, John Bell and his boys would run out of the house in an attempt to catch the perpetrator in the act, but they never uncovered any evidence of the cause. Over the next few weeks, the unexplained activity began to happen inside the cabin itself. The youngest Bell children would frequently wake up in the middle of the night moaning about rats chewing on their bedposts. However, no rats were located, and the bedpost exhibited no evidence of damage. The youngsters would also frequently report that their beds, blankets, and pillows were being yanked from them and tossed to the floor in the middle of the night. The whispers followed. The sounds were too low to tell what was being spoken, but the tone and beat reminded them of a frail woman singing hymns. The murmurs, like the beatings on the walls, would get louder with time, with the speaker quoting scripture in addition to songs. Most terrifyingly, it could hold an educated dialogue with family members. Notably, the entity is believed to have recited word for word 2 religious lectures that had been delivered on the same day, but held 13 miles from each other. Although the entire Bell family were victims of these mysterious events, it was the youngest daughter, Betsy Bell, who had the most painful physical experiences as the days, weeks, and ultimately months passed. The thing would harass Betsy by repeatedly pulling her hair or slapping her, leaving obvious welts and bruises in the shape of handprints. John Bell first told his family to keep quiet about the strange occurrences, but he eventually felt compelled to tell someone, confiding in his close friend and neighbor James Johnston. Unsure of the veracity of his friend's accusations, Johnston and his wife offered to spend the night at the Bell's house. Unfortunately, they would hear the same scary noises, bangings, and whispers that evening. According to legend, Johnston leapt out of bed and yelled, "In the name of the Lord, who are you and what do you want?" But there was no response, and the remainder of the night passed quietly. It should come as no surprise that after James Johnston became aware of and witnessed the nightly terrors inflicted on the Bell family, It was only a matter of time until the people of the Red River community were aware of the narrative as well. In fact, word of the Bell's constant haunting spread so quickly that people traveled for miles to witness the strange events for themselves. Andrew Jackson was said to be one of those visitors. After hearing reports of the claims from the eldest Bell boys, John Jr., Drury, and Jesse, who had served under his command at the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, Jackson paid a visit to the Bell family home in 1819. The future president arrived at the Bell estate with many men, horses, and a cart. When the horses arrived on Bell's land, they allegedly came to a halt, and after spending some time attempting to push the animals ahead, the horses that were pulling the wagon refused to carry on further. "By the eternal boys, that must be the Bell Witch," Jackson finally exclaimed. In answer, an unidentified female voice announced that the men might now walk to the residence and that she would see them later. The horses suddenly continued up the walk to the Bell house without encouragement. That evening began quietly enough until one of Jackson's men, a self-proclaimed witch tamer, began gloating and tormenting the specter. He declared that the lack of activity was due to its dread of him and what he could do to it. Without warning, the putative witch tamer began to scream, his body violently writhing in all directions, as if being thrashed and jabbed with pins, until he was thrown headfirst out the door of the house, apparently as a consequence of a kick to his rear. The same female voice the men had heard earlier in the day reappeared and threatened to reveal and torment another fraud among the group if they stayed in the house any longer. Jackson's soldiers pleaded to be allowed to leave the property, but the Major General insisted on staying in order to identify the second alleged fraud. Unfortunately, it is uncertain what transpired next, but witnesses reported seeing Jackson and his men the next morning in neighboring Springfield, headed towards Nashville. Throughout it all, young Betsy Bell remained the entity's primary focus, with things reportedly coming to a head when Betsy wanted to marry. Her future husband was Joshua Gardner, a young man from the same village, and while the couple had their parents' approval to marry, they did not have the witch's permission. Betsy and Joshua Gardner were unable to spend time together or go to the neighboring fields, rivers, or cave without being followed by the witch's unpleasant taunts. Constantly insisting that Betsy not marry her beloved, perhaps Betsy's patience ran out. Or she ultimately agreed with the witch because on Easter Monday, 1821, Betsy met with Joshua at the river and called off their engagement, putting an end to the supernatural disturbances. Despite its concentration on Betsy, the witch actually despised her father, John Bell Sr. Perhaps the wrath and animosity sprang from the first encounter when John Sr. shot at the unknown animal, or perhaps this entity was someone he had despised in life. According to reports, John Bell Sr.'s health began to deteriorate after the pounding noises began in their home. He began to have spells of facial twitching and mouth paralysis, which made eating and swallowing difficult. He would be confined to his home by the fall of 1820. The creature reveled in Bell's condition, removing his shoes when he tried to walk or slapping his face when he began to have seizures. It could be heard cursing and chastising old Jack Bell all throughout the farm. John Bell Sr. died on December 20th, 1820 after falling into a coma. Following his death, a vial of unidentifiable liquid was discovered in the family home's pantry. Unsure of where it came from, John Jr. handed some to the family cat, who promptly laid down and died. The witch reacted quickly to this finding, gleefully declaring, "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him." Bell Jr. hurled the vial into the fireplace, which exploded into bluish flames that shot up the chimney. The funeral for John Bell was one of the largest ever held in Robertson County, Tennessee. As family and friends were leaving the cemetery, the witch could be heard giggling and singing a song about brandy. The song continued till the last visitor departed the grounds. The witch's existence was essentially non-existent after John Bell's death, except for its demand on Betsy's possible marriage. The witch appeared to have served its mission with John Bell's death. It is reported that the witch talked to Bell's widow in April of 1821, telling her that it was going and would return in 7 years. The witch reappeared in 1828. The majority of the activity revolved around John Bell Jr., who spoke with it about the origin of life, Christianity, and the necessity for a broad spiritual awakening. The witch would also appear to make correct forecasts of the American Civil War and other future events. Before leaving again, the witch vowed to return in 107 years to see the most direct descendant of John Bell Sr. The entity became known as the Bell Witch, and in 1934, just 1 year shy of the prophesied 107 years, Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, a Nashville physician and the closest surviving descendant, wrote a book about his ancestors' haunting. Unfortunately, no sequel was ever released. He died in 1945, and it is uncertain whether the Bell Witch ever vowed to return again. The legend of the Bell Witch is now regarded as one of the most well-documented hauntings in American history. However, if it hadn't been for Martin V. Ingram, the narrative might have gone into obscurity. On June 20th, 1832, Ingram was born in Kentucky. During the Civil War, he was a member of the Nashville Battalion for the Confederacy until an injury at the Battle of Shiloh caused him to be discharged. He began a career in editing and publishing in 1866 with no prior training and worked in the newspaper industry until 1881, when bad health and a family tragedy curtailed his enthusiasm and ability to continue. Ingram would visit Adams Station, once the village of Red River in Cedar Hill, Tennessee, between 1890 and 1892, for the purpose of viewing the grounds where historic and most intensely thrilling events were enacted 75 years ago. He would conduct interviews with those who were living and familiar with the wonderful phenomena that awakened such widespread sensations. Ingram would later write multiple reports about the Bell Witch, which were published in the Clarksville Leaf Chronicle over several days in July 1892. Ingram would later compile his reports and further research into a larger workbook titled An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch, the Wonder of the 19th Century and Unexplained Phenomena of the Christian Era, the Mysterious Talking Goblin that Terrorized the West End of Robertson County, Tennessee, Tormenting John Bell to His Death, the Story of Betsy Bell, Her Lover, and the Haunted Sphinx. Or as it is now known, An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch. The book's initial publication was mysteriously delayed when the printers were forced to vacate their building. The witch had apparently paid a visit to the press, displaying frenzied singing, laughter, prayers, moaning, clapping, and rattling the roof. Nonetheless, by July 1894, Ingram's book was in print, and a review in a Hopkinsville, Kentucky newspaper identified the work as a real recounting of events. The introduction of Ingram's book includes a letter from James Allen Bell, a grandson of John Bell Sr., explaining that John Bell's sons had determined that none of their family papers would be made public until the last immediate family member died, which would occur in 1891 when the family's youngest member, Joel Egbert Bell, died. It is claimed that Ingram had a friendship with Joel Bell previous to his death, and that it was from Joel that Ingram gained understanding. Nonetheless, as the youngest, his knowledge of the events came primarily from listening to his mother and sibling stories, rather than his own personal memories. Ingram's introduction also mentions family documents and a notebook entrusted to him by James Allen Bell, which Richard Williams Bell wrote when he was 35 years old in 1846. Richard Bell was between the ages of 6 and 10 when the witch first appeared at the Bell family home, and he was around 17 when it reappeared in 1828. The family document, totaling around 90 pages, is the only known eyewitness account of the Bell Witch, yet it casts doubt on the legend's veracity. It is thought that no one outside of Ingram ever saw the Bell family manuscript, causing some to question the existence of the papers, implying that the entire Bell Witch legend was created by Ingram himself, the product of a newspaper man's imagination and ability to attract the public's own imagination. The Ingram fabrication theory, or Ingram hoax, is based on the premise that if the events of the Bell Witch were so terrifying and extraordinary that people came from all over to see the disturbance for themselves, then there should have been volumes written about it. And since nothing was published prior to Ingram's book in 1894, Ingram must have made it up. However, the argument is flawed since it assumes that no additional written sources dated before Ingram's publication would ever be discovered. One such item was allegedly published in the Saturday Evening Post in 1849. It, like the Bell manuscript, was thought to be the first documented public record describing the events surrounding the Bell family. The item was reprinted in the Vermont newspaper, the Green Mountain Freeman, on February 7, 1856, under the title The Tennessee Ghost. The following lines begin the article. I am reminded of another ghost of which I have not before thought for years, that made a great noise and created a tremendous excitement at the time. It made its appearance in Robertson County, Tennessee, some 30 years ago, and upwards at the house of an old Mr. Bell. Hence I call it the Tennessee Ghost, or perhaps I had better call it the Bell Ghost, as it seemed to have visited his house on account of a daughter he had familiarly called Miss Betsy Bell. The Tennessee Ghost is the first known written article mentioning the Bell Witch, but it is not the only one. A story concerning a supposed haunted house in Springfield, Tennessee was published in April 1880. According to the story, individuals are so intrigued by the notion of a haunted house, they travel to Springfield to witness the events for themselves. The report continues. About 30 years ago, Robertson County has a sensation similar to this known as the Bell Witch, and people came from all parts of the country, even as far as New York, to hear or see her. Nashville hosted the Centennial Exposition that same year. A drawing or piece of literature many pages long, detailing the story of the Bell Witch, was said to have been created for the exposition. The piece is undated and the author is unknown. This version of the story is notable for the witch's ability to speak various languages and set the dogs on persons it did not like. The witch was also claimed to be capable of assuming the appearance of numerous animals, such as a rabbit, bear, and black dog. The key difference in this version of John Bell's death is that it is not overtly caused by the witch. The Goodspeed brothers wrote a brief account of the Bell Witch legend in the History of Tennessee in 1886. A brief narrative of the Bell Witch mythology is included in the history. It describes the entity as female and notes that the region's interest in the unexplained event was pervasive. The diversity and resemblance of these accounts written in the mid to late 1800s assists to demonstrate that Ingram did not invent the myth of the Bell Witch. Yet, the question of who or what was the Bell Witch remains unanswered. According to some versions of the narrative, the entity is a female spirit or one of a group of spirits who attempted to overthrow the Bell family. However, the entity is most usually given the name Kate. Ingram writes in an authenticated history that the witch announces itself to be Old Kate Batts Witch, and would then respond favorably to the name Kate. Kate Batts was a Red River community member, a neighbor of the Bell family, and well regarded as an eccentric woman. After a fierce argument with John Bell in life, many believe her soul is the source of the hauntings. Interestingly, historical records show that Kate Batts was probably linked to the Bell family. She was a niece of Lucy Williams Bell, John Bell Sr.'s wife, and so a cousin of the Bell children, including Betsy. There is unlikely to be any clear historical documentation to verify whether Kate was a witch. Nonetheless, she was most likely not, and was instead made a scapegoat for the supernatural events by the society owing to her eccentricity. There are several speculations about the Bell Witch as of the origin and purpose behind the family's problems with her, and while academic scholars and folklorists all have their own opinions and standards of proof, one thing is universally agreed upon. Something horribly wrong happened at the Red River settlement between 1817 and 1821. However, because the tale has been in a constant state of growth for that time, from its first appearance in newspapers through Ingram's in-depth book in 1898, it is now practically impossible to determine what is based on fact and what is based on fabrication. For example, until Ingram's work was released, the witch identifying herself as Kate was not included in the story, and due to a lack of historical data, Andrew Jackson's presence appears implausible. And as for John Bell's strange deterioration in health and subsequent death, it is most likely the result of a degenerative neurological condition, about which little was known and few remedies were available at the time. His first symptoms are similar to those of the generally non-fatal illness Bell's palsy, an illness named after its discoverer, Dr. Charles Bell, an unrelated anatomy professor, a few years after his death. However, John Bell's continued deterioration of health and the start of seizures appear to hint to another unknown deadly condition. Nonetheless, something happened, and some say it is still happening to this day. The Bell Witch is still blamed for mysterious occurrences near the old Bell family farm nearly 2 centuries later. When there is no one else nearby, people report faint sounds of chatting and children playing. After the sun goes down, unexplainable candlelights can be seen dancing around the pitch-black fields, and photographers of the area have been known to show a mist, orbs of light, or the shadow of a person who was not present when the photo was taken. What was originally the Bell family farm, encompassing 328 acres of property, has since been divided and sold numerous times. There is, however, a single parcel of land that incorporates the old Bell family home as well as the Bell family graveyard. A private foundation owns and maintains this place, and visitors must acquire permission from both the foundation and the Bell Witch herself before visiting. Well, friends, it's that time again. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening in. Just a few quick updates. We do have a Facebook and an Instagram page so that you can get pictures and updates on new episodes as well as fun interactions throughout the week, so feel free to join us over there. Every Tuesday, we are posting exclusive episodes to Patreon. If you haven't checked it out already, we would greatly appreciate if you did. The Quick Watch series is a little different, full of laughs and jokes, but with the same dose of lore and legends mixed in. Until next time, bye guys. And don't forget to switch the laundry.